Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and empowers you to live a more vibrant second half. If you find us today on any podcast platform, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share this conversation. If you're on YouTube, please remember to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss any more of these amazing conversations. Today, my guest is going to be talking about midlife reinvention, her journey of changing careers in her mid-40s, and how she now loves to use creativity and art to reignite other women's creativity. My guest today is Faigie Kobre. She is an elementary art school teacher and an artist. Faigie, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear about your story. Tell me first a little bit about what your reinvention journey was.
Okay.
What you did before and what led you to what you're doing now.
Okay. So my career started as an early childhood educator. Actually, I got a master's in early childhood education from a school called Bank Street College of Education. Anybody who's in education would have heard of it. It's in Manhattan. It's a really progressive school in terms of their educational methods. And I was a teacher. I was an early childhood teacher. And then I was a director. And then one of the things I really loved most about working in this area was I loved the art. I loved the school that I went to, this Bank Street. They're very anti like copycat cookie cutter crafts. And they're very into more creative art and kids expressing themselves. And I just loved giving kids art and watching what they could come up with without having them copy what my idea was. And what happened was then when I got married and I taught for a little bit, and then I really wanted to stay home to raise my children. And I continued in this area by becoming a workshop leader. So I started marketing myself that I give workshops, and I started giving workshops to daycare centers and Head Start programs and private schools on how to do art, how to give kids art that's really developmentally appropriate, that gets them to think and solve problems and be creative, because there's so much of this cookie cutter, copycat crafts. And so I did that for a while. And then I always loved photography. Photography was like a passion of mine. And I actually became a photographer, a portrait photographer. I did that for a really long time. As I had mentioned, you live in California. I once came out to California to take a workshop in Laguna Beach, where I learned how to become like a really high-end photographer. And I was doing that, part-time. I was doing that in my home. We had bought a home that had a really nice large den that I was using it. And I did that for 25 years, and I kind of left the education. And then I discovered internet marketing. I had a couple of teenage daughters, and for some reason I saw this was like about 2006 area, and I had gotten into internet marketing, and I thought, I'm going to buy this course for them. I bet this is something they would love to do, on the side. And I bought this course for them. And don't buy courses for your children without asking them if they want it, okay? They had zero interest. So it sat on my shelf. In those days, there were no downloads. I got it in the mail, so I had sat in its shrink wrap for a while. And I said, I'm going to look at this. This is really interesting to me. And I started going through it, and it was really interesting to me. So I wanted to create some kind of product to sell, like an information product. And they tell you to look at what you know. And what did I know? I knew art and kids. So I started creating stuff for kids and art. I created some ebooks. I started a website. And I started really getting into this internet marketing. And then I was slowly getting a little burnt out from the photography.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way I was doing it also, it was a whole method I was doing, and it really, you needed to do like an enormous amount to, to make money, because I had these partnerships with these very high-end car dealerships where people would get gift certificates. But the idea was I would make money if people purchased up. And so you had to do a lot. You had to do a lot of that, in order for people to purchase up. So I started getting interested in internet marketing, and I started this website for kids art. And then I realized I need to learn how to market it. So I took a course on how to market it. And while I was working with some of the coaches there, one of the women, lovely woman, Marsha, her name was. Marsha, if you're listening to this, I'm very grateful to you. And she said to me, do you ever think of starting something for women? You're talking about where women's blocks came from, like why people don't feel creative, and how it came, for the most part, it came from their early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of time people equate drawing skills with creativity. So if you don't know how to draw, you're not creative, aside from the fact that you can learn to draw if you want to, but it's hard work. But there's so much creativity without drawing. So people automatically, and then they had teachers who said nasty things to them or put them down. And so she suggested starting a creativity website. So I started doing research on creativity for adults. And I kept coming across this term, mixed media art. And I was very fascinated with it. So I started taking books out of the library. And then I started buying supplies. Anybody that's into the craft or art industries, they know that buying supplies is a separate hobby. You know how many people just buy supplies and never use it? I don't know what there is. There's such a rush in buying art supplies. But so I got into that, and I started this website, this Creativity Reignited website that I have. And I started a small class in my house for mixed media, and I started doing online classes. And then one day I was looking through my library website for more mixed media books, and I came across this book called Pigments of Your Imagination, which was all about alcohol inks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was absolutely fascinated, and I ordered the book, and then I bought the book, and then I started buying the supplies. And it was just something that added, just like a completion to the creativity, because I realized that alcohol inks is something that for people who are not into realistic, and they're nervous about their things not looking right, mm-hmm. it's like the perfect thing. So I got very into alcohol inks, and I had courses, and I do offline classes and online classes, and I find that alcohol inks is really like one of the most perfect ways to get into reigniting your creativity. Now, what's interesting is that for a long time I was really only concentrating on alcohol inks, but there really are other very non-representational ways, and I've done that kind of stuff too. There's alcohol inks, there's doodling, there's collage, which doesn't have to be very perfect. There are certain kinds of painting and mixed media that are also very, very non-threatening. And adding one of these things to your life just adds so much color and so much joy. And I find that it's mostly women like us in our midlives that are the ones that are attracted to this. They're not as busy. For the people that have had families and children, they're just not as busy, either empty nesters or they're retired. And it is just something that it just adds such a dimension to your life. It adds color, it adds interest, it adds excitement. I can't even tell you how my juices start flowing when I read another a book on mixed media or alcohol ink, or when I go into an art supply store. And I think that people who are so scared to get into it because they don't draw are really selling themselves short. And there are a number of ways for them to get into creativity and adding creativity to their lives that just is so beneficial to them that this is something that I'm very passionate about introducing to people and, helping them add this interest to their life.
Mm. So basically, you kind of came full circle back to the education, but it ended up leading you to this creativity for women. Now, I'm listening to you tell the story about how women feel intimidated, or people just in general. Art is such a trigger point for so many people. It was for me as well, because I had a difficult season of life in junior high. And during that time, I got heavily criticized for the way I did a painting. And it just, again, I had such a strong passion. It was hidden for so long. And so I went into makeup artistry, and I used my art in other ways, but I hear your excitement, and I totally understand. And so I want to kind of, if anyone's really listening and thinking, I'm not an artist, I think that sentence just needs to go away. I'm hearing what you're saying. It's not about creating an actual representation of something. Somehow we've decided to define art as this one thing. And I hear you saying maybe we should move away from the art. And people say I'm not creative, and I don't agree with that, because if you've cooked, if you've gardened, there's so many things where you've used creative solution problems. Like, people, if we could just think of it in terms of another way to express, right? Because I think art is the most ultimate expression of joy, or what we find interesting. Because what you're talking about with the alcohol inks, I haven't actually gotten into it. I'm curious about it. But to your art supply, Bunny Trail, my daughter and I were, she went with me. I was helping a friend. She has a nonprofit, and I was doing a pop-up for her. And we happened to be in the same neighborhood as our favorite art supply, which is not close to home. So we were both like, she looks at me and she's like, so, and I'm like, like nobody's finishing their sentences. We're like, yes.
So we need a support group, right? There definitely has to be some kind of AA for people who just buy craft supplies. There's right? There's such a rush you get from it, right?
And it's never enough. And I use mine. I was much more consistent during quarantine, but I have to say that, Faigie, when we talk about creativity, I feel like let's just stop a moment and dismantle the false assumptions around what that is. And everyone is creative. We've just defined it in a way that excludes ourselves, I think, a lot of the time. Right. Am I right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm telling you, what happened is that it became, it's not necessarily our fault. Sometimes it's our teachers, and sometimes it's what kids do to themselves. Because the way I teach, I have like a very, I have a choice-based program, and I work so hard on trying to get kids to feel creative. I just heard a 6th grade kid say last week, I can't draw a stick figure. And I said, I can't believe I have a kid in my class that's still feeling that way. So I am going to go in and I am going to try to give her some very little basic skills to show her, yes, you can. Because what happens is, there are very few people that are born with that golden pencil in their hand. There are people that just are natural artists. It's not fair, because that doesn't mean people who are not musical, people who can't sit down and bang out a Beethoven or Mozart, that doesn't say you shouldn't enjoy music and you shouldn't play music and you shouldn't take lessons. But for some reason, it's the natural artists who have ruined it for everybody else. What happens is also is that, I'll tell you what a very big thing happens is, how when you can't teach a kid how to walk if they're not ready to walk, right? You can't get a kid to crawl if they're not ready to crawl, or to talk. I mean, sometimes you can do some speech therapy, but to speak, you really have to wait till the natural development works. So art also has natural development. And what happens is, when someone gets stunted in their development, let's say in their gross motor development, and I have a grandchild that never crawled. And as a result, he needs to get some kind of OT because he lost something, okay? Mm-hmm. So what happens is, in the art development, kids start out with art is they need to learn what the materials are. Okay, what the materials are. This makes a mark on a paper, not on a wall, not on your couch. This is what we do with it. Okay. Then the kids have to just experience the materials and use the paint and use the crayons and not to make anything because they are too young to make anything. What happens is we take our adult expectations and we put it onto these kids, and they are expected to create things before they're ready to do it. So they never really have time to really just play and let it naturally. Then when they play, they will naturally start creating. When I taught many years ago, I remember I was teaching 5-year-olds, kindergarten. I had a little kid come, a foreign kid came. He came from Egypt, actually. And he had a very high IQ, but he had never been in school before. And, we had an easel and I had, all kinds of great things. And I remember he went over to the easel. He was painting like a 3-year-old. He was 5 and he was very, very bright. He was painting like a 3-year-old. And I watched him over the year. All of a sudden, his paintings started becoming more thoughtful and he started using more shapes. And then in a couple of months, he was painting people and realistic. I'm not saying, anatomically, however you say it, correct, but he was allowed to go through the process. And then it kind of naturally started doing what he was supposed to be doing developmentally. But most people's creative experiences were stunted and they really weren't allowed. So I want people to play. I want people to get back that fun and excitement that they never had. Now, if you want to learn, anybody can learn how to draw. There's so many different methods. It is hard work. So you have to want to do it. But people can, and people, you hear all about, there's a Betty Edwards program, drawing on the right side of the brain, how people have learned. There's a guy, Mark Kistler, I have his books, how he could teach anybody, Mona Brooks. There are these people that really can teach anybody how to draw. You don't have to, though. You can play and you can create beautiful. I happen to have something like this sitting right here. I have, that's a beautiful abstract piece using pretty colors, and there's no need to, make a Rembrandt or, and because it gives you such pleasure, the joy. I remember going through art supply stores before I really got into this and literally feeling this terrible unfulfilled need. Like, I desperately want to use these materials, but I don't know how, and I don't know what to do with them. And it is such a joy for people to be able to learn how to use materials and just to have fun and to use the right colors and to make something pretty that's abstract. And if you want to go on and learn more techniques, good. This is, most of the people getting into this are midlifers, retired people. And it's just such an amazing outlet for people.
I'm hearing you, express these experiences that you've had with children. And I think there is the conversation around expectation, right? We have certain ideas of what art is. Not that we all agree on what art is, because clearly that's not how the world works, but we do seem to have a common idea about what is an artist and what is not an artist. And so I love that you talk about thinking like a child, being playful, giving yourself space, allowing yourself to experiment a little bit and be curious about what feels good. I was just telling my daughter last night that, I love texture. So this is to help people if they're thinking about like what it is. If you don't know what you love or you don't know what you're interested in, then all we need to do is play and figure out, like, pay attention to what feels good. What do we like? What colors are we drawn to? Like, these are the things that, instead of focusing on, for me, what the outcome is going to be. Like, I was watercoloring some postcards to send to my girlfriends, and I used salt on the watercolor, or I used a little bit of rubbing alcohol on the colors, but
That's
just
fun.
play fun.
Right.
There's the thing. If women are listening and they're thinking like, I have no idea where to start, because you and I already had the conversation about art supply stores. Art supply stores overwhelm some people. For me, I'm busy going, Gina, you don't need
stop.
You don't need it. But I want it. So you and I are on the same page of like, and what's so funny, this is just another bunny trail, is like, if my girls are artists as well. And so what'll happen is I pushed art in our home as a way for them to grow, because it's something I wanted to do, but because of that negative experience, I was basically avoiding it. And through my girls becoming proficient in their own,
you were living
skills,
vicariously through them.
Oh, totally. And they knew it. So they were like, so your turn. That's what would happen. Your turn. And they'd start like going, all right, here's some watercolors. Go ahead, So I found that for me, paying attention to what brought me the joy, because you mentioned the joy. And because my journey was a healing journey around art, I surrounded myself with it. I found other ways to express myself in it. But if somebody else is feeling that sense of disconnect, like, that's not me, I can't fill in the blank, it doesn't even matter if it's, quote, ugly. In other words, if the colors aren't perfect or the shapes aren't perfect, there's something to be said for allowing yourself to communicate with a medium. And I think art really is just another form of communication. If people could quit worrying about the outcome
and what people are going to say about it, so you don't have to show people, there is, and there are ways to turn things into beautiful things. Like when I teach people not to throw out their alcohol ink messes, we make collages out of them. Now it's interesting because until now I have had on my website, Creativity Reignited, if people want to get started with alcohol inks, you can go and you can I have this video showing you how to use alcohol ink markers, which are Sharpies. And if you use Sharpies with alcohol, you can get very much the same effects. But I don't know when this podcast episode is coming out, but by the time it does come out, I'm changing things up a little bit on my website. Is where the name of my website is Creativity Reignited. And until now, it's been mostly geared towards alcohol inks. But I'm changing it up because I want people to get a taste of a lot of different ways. There's doodling, there's abstract painting, there's collage. So there's gonna be something on there. By the time you go there, there's going to be something on there that's going to give you a little bit of a taste of how to get your creativity reignited without necessarily concentrating on just one particular medium, because people are drawn to different things.
The collage that you're mentioning, I think that's a great way for people to start, because you can technically collage with anything, so you don't have to spend a lot of money. So you and I know what collage is. So why don't you kind of just talk a little bit about what mixed media is and collage, because that's something you can do.
Okay, right. So mixed media, that's how I really got into this as an adult. I got into art as an adult through mixed media. So mixed media is really a combination. That's where shopping in craft stores is so much fun, because it's a mixture. It's using stencils, it's using stamps, it's collaging, it's making painted papers and collaging with them. It's writing, it's watercolors, it's a whole combination. I ran a class in my home for about 5 years. We just kind of disbanded for now because there's just not a lot of women left in the group. But we did it in an art journal. We had a journal, and that way you don't have to worry about what are you going to do with all your pieces. So that happens to be a very nice thing. What I did was I transferred that when I started doing alcohol inks, and I like the concept of having things together. So I would buy these. I have these books with sleeves for 5x7. I use 5x7, 8x10, and I'll stick the pieces in there. But I like to look at the stuff that I've done. But it's very much it's very free, and it's very so many things that goes, and there's so much out there. There's so much out there, so much free out there. There's so much to buy out there. There's books, there's classes, there's courses, there's YouTube, there's it's endless. But I do know that people sometimes get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I start? Like, what do I do? Where do I start? So this is really what, I've kind of also become like a creativity coach, where I want to help people. And until now it was through alcohol links, but now I'm adding other things to it. Let me help you through. How did you get blocked? Let's work through that. It's not true what that stinky teacher said to you. You are creative. Just because you can't, draw a figure, that doesn't mean anything. Let's see what works for you, which medium works for you. Let's actually, and then, there are people that there was a woman that was part of she actually moved out of the country, but she was part of my class for a number of years. I met her years ago. I had my art journal with me, and I met her. And I said, "Oh, hi there. I'm starting an art class in my home." She said, "Me? Can't draw. My mother was a sculptress." And I opened my journal and I was showing it to her, and she said, "Hey, I can do that." And it's a good time in my life now to come. And she joined, and she did it. She was for a couple of years. And then when I got into alcohol links, she got into alcohol links. And this so opened her up, someone who never felt creative. She told me, she's out of the country now. She said she's been taking classes on acrylic painting. She sent me a picture of one of them. She just told me, you changed my life. She never felt that she could do anything. She made a bunch of alcohol ink pieces. She said, "I can sell these." Okay, that's a different, market, like learning how to sell your work if you want to. But, I had a really great idea the other day. I was thinking, I'm going to help people. Sometimes people are not confident enough to sell. They're making too many things to hang. One of the things I did when I was a photographer was, in order to market myself, I would, did I mention this before? I would give gift certificates to gift certificates to silent auctions. Okay. People can do it as a charitable thing. They could be a tax write-off. However, what people end up paying for their piece. So it's a great way to feel good. You don't have to feel that people are going to pay for it, but people will pay for it through, bidding for something. So that's just, one idea that's been, floating around in my head. But this just gives people confidence, and it spills over into other areas of your life also. Mm-hmm. When you gain confidence in one area, it's not just combined, not just contained in the art world. It just makes you feel more confident as a person. Mm-hmm. and allows you to just go forth and conquer whatever it is that you didn't think you were able to beforehand.
I think of art as a language. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can step back and just see it as a way to express ourselves, there's so many things you can do. To your point earlier, like you could doodle. And what that could be is you could do it where you write a word over and over and over with different colors of pens. You could create a picture. You can, right. You can put bits of magazines, old books, mail that right. you get that's fun colors, and that's that mixed media right. you were talking about. And right. you can paste them down on a piece of paper, and you can, spill some coffee on it and see what that does, and smack a tea bag down and get a shape. Like, in terms of a language and expressing yourselves, we said this already, but it's in my heart. I think we have a similar heart for people to understand how to be creative. So just thinking about art in terms of a language and thinking about ways that we can express ourselves was really helpful for me. Like, just finding a way to talk to yourself about it, because isn't that really underlying the whole issue anyway, is our self-talk around art and creating.
Our self-talk really also about what we're good at. And do we only do things that are perfect? Do we only create, do we only do art because we are a quote unquote artist and we can create something that's saleable? Or do we look at art as something that is healing? There's a book I read when I was doing all my research, when I started, learning about creativity for adults. It was a book called The Creativity Cure. It was written by a husband and wife team, doctors. The whole book was about what creativity does for you, how it relieves depression and anxiety and handwork, and how much more effective it is sometimes than therapy. And people talk about that all the time. One of the women that was part of my group for a long time, she tell her husband all the time, it's cheaper than therapy. And she used to come here after, I personally, when I'm exhausted, I can't necessarily feel like I want to do art. And she said she would come here after a long days of work. It like revitalized her. So it's something that has been proven to, listen, you have the whole art therapy field, right? Now you have to be a therapist and have a degree in art to learn how to do that. But obviously there's so much healing in art. And the truth of the matter is art that, I find that they use that for like more difficult cases, people that really have a hard time speaking, trauma, but just simple art therapy, just, that our handwork and, what all the research it's, that's been proven about, how much it helps us is really such an important thing. It just, and it just does not mean you have to be able to, that I've heard a lot of people tell me that art school ruined it for them. How they ended up hating art because they went to art school, because there's all these specific rules. There's the art that you want to sell, and there's the art that's for healing and for fun and enjoyment and giving gifts. And it's, there are all these rules and parameters that are around art that really take away the gift that art is for us.
You're right. I have heard that a lot. My own daughter, as a matter of fact, had a lot of freedom in art. She had one teacher who I actually went to the college and thanked him, because she's one of those really gifted artists. Like, she sculpts, she paints. Yeah. She can draw, she can animate. It doesn't, whatever she puts her hand to, I'm just like, how is that? And now she's into tattooing, and she took to that right away. And I was like, okay, it's just for her. It is a gift for her. Right. But she had a teacher specifically that when she did life drawing, had a way of communicating with her that unlocked her so quick. I mean, she accelerated under his care. But then, and she took several classes with him. He was an amazing he was the guy that I wish everybody could be in his class. Then she had another teacher, and it was just painting. And there was such a restriction on what was right that she literally stopped painting for a very long time. And she had told me, I don't like painting. And I was like, yeah, you do. That's trauma from a crummy teacher. Right. I know you love painting. These are from her. And
I can't see them so clearly, but
they're clouds. And my other daughter painted that, and it's like she started painting again. She started painting clouds, because that was a kind of an expressive way of painting. And now she paints everything and loves it. And so I hear what you're saying. We have these natural inclinations to be creative, and then life happens and squashes it, whether it's through a teacher or an experience or a criticism. But the reality is we are born to create. It's just that we define it so small sometimes. And it is, to your point, it untangles us when we give into it. Does that, I'm hearing what you're saying about you're using your hands, and those emotions get a chance to move around and unstick, or our thoughts begin to move around and unstick. And I think art is such a powerful tool
Yes.
to give us a space to
Yep.
release, to, like I said, communicate. And I know it sounds all deep and existential, but it is a way of communicating. You know, you can, for me, and I don't know about you, Faigie, but sometimes if I paint something, I know myself. If I feel like uncertain at that point, it's like stop and step away. Don't look at it again for a day or two. I have completely fresh eyes. The pressure to finish something, to make it a project and go from point A to point B and have it be a certain way, I think is part of our creative block that we have just in life in general.
I find that when the times that I've done, I used to have also this mixed media membership online. I used to do these Zooms with people, and the women used to say, just the painting, there's such a cathartic feeling to just taking that, you know, and I've always tried to do like very abstract, because I don't want them getting bogged down with that it has to be right. As long as you get the right colors and don't make mud, you're good. It's going to look beautiful. You're going to enjoy looking at it. You want to gift it to somebody, you can do that too. But it's just, you know, it's really, like I said, it's a gift that unfortunately has been stolen from most of us and given to the artists, quote unquote, which is what I'm trying to give back to the masses.
Yeah. You talked about just that feeling of putting there's something about color. Like if you start with colors you love, whether it's a pen or a pencil or a paint or an alcohol ink, I think that's a great way to start. Like if you don't love drawing with a pencil, try a pen. If you don't love drawing at all, because drawing doesn't have to be like an exact representation of something.
Right.
But finding the thing that makes you feel excited or joy and just explore, right? What you can do with that thing.
Right.
One of the things, and I don't know if you cover this, Faigie, is back to buying supplies. People feel too precious about the things that they buy. Like they can't use them until they can produce something.
Yes, that is definitely, yeah. I've had that myself also. Yeah, I've been there, done that. You know, you save it until you open it up and it's all dried out already, because you've been saving it for such a long time for that special project.
And what are we waiting for?
Right.
It doesn't the means to the end could just be joy, couldn't it?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Just to be.
And art is such a gentle tutor, really, if we could remove our expectations from it. Talking about texture, like for me, I love to palette knife paint with acrylic.
Yes. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And you know, one thing that I do, and this is just a fun idea for someone, is I switch hands. I'll do an entire painting with my left hand. And oddly, it's very enjoyable for me.
Because you know you can't do anything perfect. So it's kind of allowing you to just be imperfect and just, you know, experience the, you know, the texture. I also love that. I love using that palette knife and adding things, you know, adding texture. I'm actually teaching the kids in school now about texture. You know, there's texture and then there's implied texture, because there's, you know, showing them when they're drawing how to add texture to their drawings, and then there's real texture. So
but that's joyful too, you know, the way it feels, the way it looks, you know, the outcome. And I think joy, curiosity, you know, are such key elements to what you're talking about and what you do. It's just allowing yourself to feel what is possible to experience. Like I keep coming back to the language thing, because it really is. It's a way of expressing ourselves. And so there really is no wrong way to express yourself through art. I mean, have you ever used this example? I don't know if you have. I was a homeschooling mom. And so we were able to really have art as a major part of what we did.
Wow.
And I did official like curriculums, and we were structured that way, but I did a lot of art. And one of the things that we would do was we would play with creativity with words. We would play with creativity with any kind of art, oil pastels, poster paints. And I think people can maybe just see it as an opportunity to include it in their curriculum of life, finding the joy in the expression, because everybody is creative. I believe this.
Yeah. I think it's a God-given gift that, that, and not everybody uses it, but not everybody was given the gift of knowing how to draw, but you were given creativity. That's no question.
So I'm thinking, if somebody's hearing you and they're hearing this and they already have the objections pinging off in their minds, right? I think that what you do is you just give them permission to try.
But you also do have to be interested. There are some people that have some people are very drawn to music and have zero interest in art. But there are so many people that when you talk about it, there's something inside of them that makes them a little excited at the thought of being able to. So if you're one of those people, don't ignore it. If it doesn't ring a bell with you, if it doesn't connect or resonate with you at all, move on. Go to a concert. You know what I mean? But if it does, then you really owe it to yourself to explore it and to open it up.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, like you said, resources. I have books right in front of me that I got from the library just to kind of look at art. There's some watercolor people that I follow on Instagram that have books, and it's like, you don't have to spend a lot of money, but some of these people are fantastic at going, okay, take this color and put it here. You could do color by numbers. I have a friend that, that's what she said she likes to do. She wants the structure, but she still likes to paint. So it reduces the decision-making, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For me, I don't want to do that. But
so there's different. So like in this book, The Creativity Cure, there's two things really. There's the creativity, and then there's the handwork. And even if it's not totally creative, doing the handwork with like some kind of art is very beneficial. If you add the creativity to the mix, and it doesn't even have to be totally making some kind of changes. Like if you have something you're copying from someone and you add your own spin to it and make it a little bit different, that's creative. Making something new out of something old is creative. So there's a lot of ways people, go. You have the completely structured on one end and the completely freedom to, that's anarchy. It's people are totally lost when it's total freedom. So you definitely need some kind of structure. It just depends on how much structure. Sometimes people can start with more structure, and that leads them to the confidence to be able to work without so much structure.
When you mention creativity, I think about photography, food, gardening, interior design,
writing.
Writing, table decoration. Some people do that. Like art doesn't necessarily mean paint and paper. You can be artistic in many ways. And so I think it's super important for people to hold a space for it, because I know from personal experience that joy is on the other side. Frustration is there when our expectations and our stories get in the way, I think, 100%. When we can enjoy and play. So I would love to have you share 3 things for people to anchor in on, ways that you want to encourage them to be more creative.
You'll go to my website, Creativity Reignited, and I will have stuff for you to help you make a decision, easy, inexpensive ways for you to get started. There'll be something probably, and right now we're recording this, it's right before Thanksgiving. So of course things can change many times, but there's going to be stuff there with mixed media, maybe myth doodling, maybe some painting, maybe some alcoholing. So there's going to be a mixture. There's going to be a way for you to jump in, a very low barrier for you to just get in there and start, doing. Maybe we can get some more people onto our, craft supply membership, I was a Craft Supply and Manner, CSA, Craft Supplies Anonymous. But that's, in 3 ways. I'm just saying 3 ways is because there will be more than 3 ways for you. Just if you check out my website, and you will be able to see. If you really are interested in alcohol links, I haven't done much on social media, but I do have an Instagram and a Facebook account called @CreativeAlcoholLinking. If you really want to just see, I have a lot of old stuff there. Really want to see. It's a very vibrant. People love that medium. It's very flowy and free, and it's a lot of fun. But you don't have to limit yourself to that. But do it. Just do it. Decide how you're going to start. You start small and start bringing it into your life. It'll be life-changing.
I totally agree. And if you don't like something, don't do it.
Go on to the next. Right.
Yes. There's so many ways to do art.
Right.
But I want to thank you for being on the show today. I know you've mentioned several times your website, but I'd love to have you mention it again.
Okay. CreativityReignited.com. That's it. And if anybody needs to talk to me, I'm Faigie, Faigie, @Creativity Reignited. Anybody need to email me for anything? So one and the same, Creativity Reignited. And we want to get your creativity reignited.
Yes, we do. Faigie, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your message of encouragement for people around creativity, because we're kindred spirits for sure on this point, where I do fully believe, having, like I said, taught my girls, I watched art move through their lives and how it serves them now, and how much joy, and it's cyclical, and you have allowed people this moment. You've held a space for people to consider what creativity and art could be for them. And I really appreciate you bringing that message in such an encouraging way.
Okay, my pleasure.
Friends, if you happen to be driving while you're listening to this podcast, if you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 314, you will find links in the show notes to Faigie. You'll be able to find her easily. If you are on YouTube right now, just look down below. It's in the description box, and you can see Faigie, so you know exactly who you're looking for and what is there. And this is some of her alcohol ink art, which, by the way, things that flow are a fun thing to play with, I must say.
Yes, because watercolors are also so.
It is my love. And anything that you hear about art, my friends, any idea you have about art, if you find that it causes a restriction in your heart and your mind, Faigie and I both encourage you to step back and allow yourself some curiosity. Allow yourself to go back to that idea of play. Don't set the expectations of an outcome other than the joy of creating. Allow yourself some space to try. Find the thing that brings you joy. Of course, Faigie and I are talking about different kinds of art in terms of painting and drawing and alcohol inks, but you could try food, you could try garden design, you could try interior design. Find something that you can do that will work that side of your brain, and see if it doesn't give you some kind of release, some kind of joy, some kind of expression. Allow creativity to become one of the languages that you speak. And if you have any questions at all, Faigie has shared her email address. And again, it will be in the show notes. So it'll be easy to reach out to her if you have any questions. And friends, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share this conversation, especially if you know someone who needs this encouragement. You see that spark of creativity in them and they're resisting it. Share this conversation. Allow them to see the possibility. Allow yourself to see the possibility. And I want to thank you so much for giving us your time today, for spending that time with us. I look forward to sharing more inspirational people and conversations and tips and strategies in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.